Welcome to the Farming Country podcast, here to share the latest farming news, views and interviews as we step into the spring here in the Dales. I'm Ted Ogden from Craven Cattle Marts, and in today's episode...
Next month, all levy payers will have an opportunity to tell us not only which of our products and services they want to see their money invested behind, but also what are the big issues that we should be focused on.
Jeremy Eaton speaks to AHDB Chief Executive Tim Rycroft to get all the information on the impending levy payers vote. Suzie Knight of the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust gathers a few fellow members up from the Upper Aire Project to talk about soil health and working with worms. We hear from supply chain consultant and agricultural journalist Cedric Porter on how the devastating conflict in the Ukraine is impacting our industry. And here on site, the NFU's Sam Bradley chats with Craven Farm Vets director Andy Barrett about lambing time and taking the necessary steps to adapt at phasing out of Spectam. Let's get cracking. Funded by farmers, growers and others in the supply chain, the Agricultural and Horticultural Development Board strive to help the industry succeed in a rapidly changing world, working to create a world-class food and farming industry. This April, levy payers will have the opportunity to have their say on the challenges they want AHDB to focus on and the services that matter to them. Here's Chief Executive Tim Rycroft with more on the shape of the future at AHDB.
The context, of course, is the ballot result in horticulture and potatoes last year, where those sectors voted to stop the levy. And obviously that was a big moment for AHDB. We had to listen very carefully to what we were being told. We had to think about how we would ensure that we stay closer in touch with our levy payers in the four remaining sectors. And the plan that we came up with was to have this consultative vote next month, where all levy payers will have an opportunity to tell us not only which of our products and services they want to see their money invested behind, but also what are the big issues that we should be focused on. And really certainly for the last 6 months since I arrived and some time before that, we've been putting all our energies into putting this campaign together, trying to raise awareness among levy payers of why it's important that they should have their say, and demonstrating that we're an organisation that has listened to levy payer feedback and is changing.
So what do you see from a producer's point of view? We're obviously producing this podcast more designed for the livestock sector, and there are mixed farms who come to us from the arable sector who buy their stock from us seasonally as well. So what sort of messages should livestock producers take from this and the ability to have their say on this procedure?
Well, one of the things that I've learned in my 6 months is that all the sectors are different, and of course there's a significant crisis in the pork sector at the moment, whereas in beef and lamb and in dairy we've got a different situation. We've got quite strong prices in beef and lamb. We've got an issue with farm gate prices in dairy, which may or may not get resolved soon. And I think in the livestock sectors, what I hear from our levy payers is that they very much value the work we've done to defend the reputation of British meat and dairy. The We Eat Balanced adverts that have been on television in January and February, really extolling the virtues of great British meat and dairy for their sustainability and nutrition credentials. They also value the work we're doing to open up new export markets. I was at a dinner only a few nights ago with quite a high-ranking American trade delegation talking about getting British sheep meat back into the US, which is something we're pretty hopeful that will happen in the next few months now. A door is ajar and we're kicking hard at it to get it fully open. I think livestock will also be interested in the work that we've done around genetics, around improving the technical quality of animals, about the animal health and welfare pathway that George Eustace mentioned in his speech to the NFU. So I think that AHDB has a lot to offer, and all sectors right now will also be thinking, of course, about the implications of the crisis in Ukraine. We've just opened a new portal on our website to help levy payers understand some of the consequences, both the kind of the near-term ones and how this might play out in the longer term. So I do feel that it's a great opportunity for us to showcase the products and services that we provide and to demonstrate why we think we do provide value for money for the levy.
What does a producer need to do to have their say in this?
They've got to register with us, and I know some people will wonder why that's a necessary step. The fact is that, of course, in most cases, we don't invoice the levy directly to the individual producer. The levy is collected by the processor or the abattoir or the mill, and is then aggregated and then passed on to us as an aggregate figure. So in fact, kind of extraordinarily, we don't precisely know who all our levy payers are, which is why we need to ask them to register. To do that, they go to our website, ahdb.org.uk, and they will see on that front page of the website there's a link there to Shape the Future. That will take them to a very short form. It takes about 3 or 4 minutes to fill in, just some very basic details. Once you're registered, when we open the vote next month, you'll get a link which will take you through to the voting process.
Is voting open to organisations such as ourselves, who we collect levy on behalf of AHDB as an auction mark, for example?
Everybody who pays the levy qualifies, but I would also say that, of course, for organisations like yours with whom we work closely, the votes are going to be a very important input to our sector councils in terms of deciding on funding priorities, but it's not the only input. We're also taking into account the views of stakeholders like yourselves, whether that's through one-to-one meetings or whether it's through attendance at events or other feedback that you give to our knowledge exchange teams on the ground. So we want to hear from all our stakeholders. We're doing our best to be as open as possible, to be out there on farm, but also available, of course, through the web. We want to be able, when we make those funding decisions in the coming summer, to feel we've got the very best possible evidence of what levy payers want us to do.
Once you've got the results from the vote, then what are the next steps after that then?
So we'll get the results early in May. We will, of course, publish that pretty quickly after we've received them. We will be very transparent about the whole process. Those results will then go to our sector councils, who will meet in the summer, and they will be the ones who will make the decisions about funding for programmes, and they will get those results reported both on a one levy payer, one vote basis, but also segmented by size, so that they can see if there's a difference between the views of the smaller and the larger levy payers. And then there will be an open meeting for each of the sectors in the autumn of next year, probably October, maybe early November, where, again, levy payers will get to meet the sector councils, and the sector councils will be explaining the decisions that they want to make, that they propose to make about levy funding, and levy payers will again have an opportunity to input at that stage.
There's plenty of content, I believe, on the AHDB website, isn't there, as well, for producers to familiarise themselves with as well. But is there anywhere else there may be a reference to, just to inform themselves about AHDB, what they're getting for the money, levy payers?
Yeah, so the website is probably the main place. You'll also see a lot of this going out on our social media channels, on Twitter, for example. And at all of our events now, we're spending time talking about how the levy is currently spent. So there's some very useful diagrams going around which shows the value of an animal, for example, of that, how much is levy, and of the levy, which bits of it go to which programmes of work. And all that information is again available on the website. It will also be on the voting form. So when you come to cast your vote, you can either, if you've got a clear and strong view about what you want to say, you can just breathe through, you can give a rating out of 5 for each of the products, tools and services that are relevant to your sector, and you can tell us which are the issues that are important to you. Or if you feel you want to understand a bit more about the choices, there will be links to click through to take you to more detail, so that you can, if you like, you can spend more time understanding some of the choices that you're being asked to make.
Is it that positive feedback in different directions that might influence the way you load the allocation, for example, for export development or UK consumer promotions? Is it a forum that will enable you to judge the levy payer's opinion as to the direction of funding in the future?
We think we've got a reasonably good idea of what levy payers value, but it's kind of extraordinary, really, that we've never in the past actually gone out and asked them if what our assumptions are correct. And really this is about saying, look, here's what we think are the big issues for your sector. Here's what we think are the products and services that we provide that we think are of most value to you. And for the first time, levy payers will be able to say to us, yes or no, we agree with that or we don't. I want to see more of my levy spent on exports, or I want to see more of my money spent on marketing, or I want to see less of it spent on genetics, let's say. So we will be able to validate our thinking and properly to take into account what levy payers want. And, some of that, as I have said to our team, some of that may be uncomfortable for us. We may find there are things that we think are very, very good that levy payers just say are not important to us right now, or that are much less important than some of the other stuff you're doing. And we will have to take that into account as we and the sector councils make the decisions about allocating the money in the summer.
Thanks very much indeed, Tim. It's a very, very important time for farmers at the moment with what's going on in the world, but already policy that was set in stone anyway prior to disruption in Europe as well. And I think, you know, we value the feedback that we get from you about the landscape round here and the importance of livestock within that landscape.
Very glad to hear that.
If you're keen to have your say, then you must be registered before 31st of March to vote. So head on over to ahdb.org.uk and click on the link on the home screen. Coming up,
all the good stuff that farmers should be doing, they need to be super careful about now because we don't have Spectam as a comfort blanket anymore.
as Spectam is discontinued, it's time for sheep farmers to embrace change. First though, as the heartbreaking Russian invasion of the Ukraine continues to unfold, it's time to look into how the crisis is impacting farmers in the Ukraine and here at home.
I'm Cedric Porter and I'm a supply chain consultant and agricultural journalist. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has caused a massive effect on the global agricultural market and looks to continue doing that for some time to come. We've seen wheat prices for later on this season May nearly touching £300 a tonne for feed wheat and at around £250 a tonne for the new harvest as well. So obviously that's a massive effect on not just for wheat farmers but also for the feed industry. The direct effect of the feed industry disruptions to Ukrainian supply won't be that big. We imported around 85,000 tonnes of animal feed from Ukraine last year. That was more or less double the year before, but it was only less than 2% of total imports. So not going to have so much an effect there. But of course, the high price of wheat and other commodities as well, like sunflower, soya, so they've all gone up and look like staying up for as long as the conflict takes place. Of course, we're into a key spring planting time for Ukraine and the rest of the world, and there could be disruption to that planting in Ukraine, particularly of those spring crops such as maize, sunflower, potatoes and others. The wheat crop is more or less in the ground, it's largely winter wheat, but there's going to be problems for them in getting fertiliser, perhaps problems getting the labour as people are called to fight rather than farm, and just general disruption to of course shipping and transport links throughout the country. Other input prices including fertiliser and of oil have gone up along with gas prices. It's quite difficult to find some good news amongst this. But of course, the fact that all food is going to be welcomed and very valuable this year, so that includes meat production as well. So there will be opportunities, and I think we'll probably see most commodity prices, including meat prices, lamb and beef prices, holding up as we go through the crisis, because people will just need the food. And I suppose with global supply chain difficulties, then British production will be valued more than it has been for perhaps a long time. So a real period of uncertainty faces us, and it's really worth following that sort of market because it is going to impact on everybody as we go through the next few months.
Agricultural journalist Cedric Porter there. For more information on how you can help the Ukraine appeal, head to gov.uk. Now it's time to dig deep and talk soil health. So let's hand over to Suzie Knight of the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and the Upper Aire Project. She's joined by Phil Lyth and Anne Hanson of the Yorkshire Farming Wildlife Partnership, along with Iain McDonell of the Yorkshire Environment Agency.
Anne, you are our resident worm expert. What can the worms that you find in your soil pit tell you?
Don't call me an expert, Susie. But yes, I love earthworms, and I'm very fond of them. You get basically they will tell you if your soil is healthy. Worms do not live happily in compacted soil. They also don't live happily in soil that's turned over too much. So ploughing is not good for earthworms. It can kill up to 68% of your worms ploughing. So if farmers are going into reseed fields, they are much better in terms of the soil health, not ploughing it, to be perfectly honest, and actually overseeding or using some other technique, not just from the worm's point of view, from the soil's point of view as well. But there's 3 different sorts of worms. I won't go on forever about them, but it is important that there's 3 different sorts of worms, because you get your epigeic worms. They've all got funny names. These are groups of worms, not species, and they sit in the top layer and process all that dead plant material. So all that thatch that you want out of your grass, they process that, turn it into food for the growing grass. So they're very important. Endogeic live a bit further down, and these are the ones that burrow a lot. They're very busy little things, burrow all the time, process nutrients, move nutrients around the soil profile. So again, that's accessible to the grass then, and they're aerating it. They're effectively nature's aerators. And then you get the anisic worms, which are the ones that have permanent burrows, which go down to about 1 metre. These are quite amazing things in the way they can burrow for such a small animal. And they live quite deep in the soil. So, but you need all 3 sorts. That's the point. For healthy soil, you need all these worms to be in there, and they will all do their own jobs and look after your soil. And there is a wonderful statistic that says that in grassland, up to 40 tonnes of soil per hectare per year can be formed by earthworm casts. So that's how much soil they are turning over in fields.
Right.
Effectively creating good soil conditions.
I mean, how long's a piece of string? How many worms would you want to find?
That is how long's a piece of string. I have seen so many research reports on worms in different sorts of soils, and basically, I think it's very difficult to say. And if you start to leave soil alone completely, you'll find your earthworm count just starts to go up,
right?
Basically, but that's if you're not grazing it or anything, so it's getting so rewilding effectively. The earthworm count shoots up. But if you're farming conventionally, you would kind of hope if you dug a little soil pit that you'd be getting somewhere between 30 and 50 worms out of it.
Yeah, and if you don't see any,
you're in trouble.
Have a little think. Yeah.
I think it's also important to say at that point it's around when you're digging your soil is actually sampling your soil as well and getting that analysed. And when we talk about that, not just for your P and K, but looking more at your organic matter as well, because along with the worms is microbial biomass as well that's in there. So the little fungi can connect right across the soil. And just listening today on the radio, they're finding something like 2,000 different species of fungi every year, and that's phenomenal. And some of them are over hundreds of meters potentially. So it's not just about the worms; it's about the other part of the soil that helps to build the soil health. And I think by understanding your organic matters, you're also potentially allowing that soil to improve, and that allow more water to go into there.
Thanks to Suzie and Co there. If you're looking to find out more, links for all the mentioned organisations can be found in the episode notes and on the CCM Facebook page. Before we go, let's nip over to our resident vet's practice for some advice as we get stuck into lambing time.
So Spectam's oral drench given to lambs soon after birth for the prevention and for the treatment of watery mouth, but sadly it's no longer available.
Why has Spectam been removed from your arsenal of treatment?
It's part of a general direction, really, Sam, to reduce the use of antibiotics in livestock. Obviously, whenever antibiotics are used, there's an increasing risk of resistance developing, and that has implications for human health, big implications for human health. So the veterinary profession and farmers have been under pressure for a few years now to reduce what they call prophylactic use, preventative use of antibiotics. And as the use has fallen, then some of these products have become marginal, and I think in the case of Spectam, that's probably why it's not being made any longer.
So Andy, best practices with Spectam off the market, what should farmers be looking to do in their lambing sheds at lambing time to prevent watery mouth?
Okay, Sam, well, prevention is definitely key. So watery mouth caused by E. coli, found in the environment. Lambs are born without any defences at all, so it's vital that they get good quality colostrum into them as quickly as possible after birth. 50 mils per kilo, so average lamb looking at 250 mils, soon as possible after birth, should be within 2 hours. And they need to go on and get 200 mils per kilo in the first 24 hours, so about a litre into a decent sized lamb. So to produce that, the ewes need to be well fed and in good body condition. And it's also really important that you keep the environment as clean as you can. it's a battle between the E. coli and the colostrum as to sort of what comes out on top, and if the E. coli wins, then there's watery mouth there. So making sure sheep go into lambing pens in a clean condition, that the pens are cleaned out as well as possible, that navels are dipped, that sort of thing. So all the good stuff that farmers should be doing, they need to be super careful about now, because we don't have Spectam as a comfort blanket anymore.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Andy, and we'll see you back on here soon.
Andy Barrett of Craven Farm Vets with Sam Bradley. The vets will be back again next time. If you have a burning question or a hot topic you'd like to hear them cover, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And if you fancy featuring in a future episode of the Farming Country podcast, simply send us an email or give us a call. All the details are online at ccmauctions.com. And finally, some breaking news, quite literally. Hot off the press this week is the latest issue of the annual company magazine, CCM News. So read all about us. Hard copies are available from the Mart office, while the magazine can also be downloaded and read via the homepage link on our website. But that's your lot for today. We'll be back again with an all-new episode in a few weeks' time. But from me and the Farming Country podcast team, thanks for listening and happy lambing time.